science and research, we have studied how to do it.
The prophet Isaiah wrote about a time when the desert would rejoice and blossom as a rose. To Israelis, that's more than an ancient prophecy. It's a commandment.
Israel is a tiny state. Look at a map of our region. We use always to joke, there's not even enough place on the map to write the name of Israel. So we had to conserve it, to keep it, to maintain it. This is what we have.
To the early settlers in Israel, going green meant planting trees. And they started in the Negev desert, a place that gets only 1 to 7 inches of rain a year. In the 1940s, Jerusalem was still under Arab control. And Israel's first prime minister, David Ben-Gurion, believed that the Negev was the future of Israel. So he ordered the creation of a man-made forest there. But his team of scientists said it couldn't be done. Ben-Gurion's response? No problem. We'll get new scientists. The prime minister got his new scientists, and the Negev desert began to blossom. Today, the Yatir forest has more than 4 million trees, including carob, pine, olive, and fig.
Israel is amongst the fewest countries in the world that at the end of the 20th century, there are much more trees than were at the beginning of this century. Till now, we have planted over 240 million trees, which is a nice number to this small country.
In the center of the forest is a vineyard, planted on the ruins of another one that existed here 2,000 years ago. Scientists researched the best plants to grow in the Negev, and one of their sources was the Bible.
There are plenty of archaeological ruins everywhere. Water cisterns, dams, terraces, everywhere. And we have started with reconstruction of some of these ancient farms. We have planted biblical trees, and the trees are surviving without additional irrigation by collecting runoff water, the same systems that our forefathers did 2,000 years ago.
The fact that we're so flourishing here is a sign that this was
part of God's spanking of what's going on there with Israel. Okay, so basically, again, by the time the Jewish pioneers get there, there was virtually no trees left. Okay, as the reports say. But again, when God says he's going to make the desert bloom, what's going to happen? I don't care how bad it is. I don't care if there's only 1 tree left. I don't care if there's no trees left. Guess what's going to happen? It's going to come back. And that's exactly what happened. The Jewish people literally were undaunted, systematically, one by one, by hand, began to replant whole forests. Okay, they established this fund. It's called the JNF, the Jewish National Fund, and that used to raise money from the Jewish population around the world to help buy the land, okay, but also to help plant trees back in the land. In fact, that one organization alone was responsible for planting over 250 million trees. That's just one organization, right? Okay, a whole forest coming back. They built 180 dams and reservoirs. They established more than 1,000 parks. In fact, what's cool, they were very strategic. They said, well, what tree? It's not just planting a tree, because how many guys knows that you plant a tree doesn't mean it's going to survive? So if you're smart, what do? You do your research and you find out what works good in this area. So that's what they did. And guess what they used as their resource? I wonder what would work good in this area. They went back to the Bible. What trees were there before we got punished? Let's plant them back again, and sure to help get the agricultural better and all that stuff. They shared it. What a concept. The kibbutz, okay, is what it's called, right? And again, as a result of this, now, because of that, the totally desolate area at the beginning of the 20th century is now the breadbasket of the whole Middle East. In fact, they export not just their needs, folks. They got a big surplus, crazy surplus, and they're going not just to the Arab countries of the Middle East, they're going throughout Europe and everything, and they grow a massive range of crops. Listen to this. This isn't all of them, right? Again, what's the content? The sheep are eating rocks, basically, as Twain said. But now you're producing wheat, sorghum, corn, all kinds of vegetables, tomatoes, cucumbers, peppers, zucchinis, citrus fruits galore, avocados, kiwis, guavas, mangoes, grapes, melons, bananas, dates, apples, pears, cherries, oranges, grapefruit, tangerines, you name it, they grow it. And back to the flowers, listen to this. They grow so many flowers, they don't just export them, but listen to this. Israel exports 1.5 billion flowers and vegetables throughout Europe and U.S., and it's exactly what's going on. In fact, they don't just have an abundance of agriculture, abundance of flowers, abundance of fruit and vegetables. Listen to this. What they grow is insanely incredible. Now, here's what's weird, and it's applicable to that land that God said is a good land. Israel, they got a couple underground aquifers there that they've tapped into, but the water in these aquifers are what's called brackish, right? Brackish is a good British type. No, brackish, again, means it's like salty. Now, how many guys realize that when you put salt on plants, that's probably not a good thing? And that's why you have a desalination plant to get rid of the salt. So you can, okay, well, it's a little salty. Well, what they found is it's just at the right, it's not too much, right? This brackish water, and listen, here's what it does to the fruit. It actually improves the fruit. This brackish water in that land, right? Listen to this. Okay, what happens when you irrigate the fruits and vegetables with this brackish water in Israel, right, the aquifers? The plant goes into a state of stress because there's a little bit of salt in it, right? Well, listen, it forces the plant to produce less leaves because the whole plant, I just need to hurry up and reproduce because I'm dying, the salt. So it forces it to not waste any of its energy on leaves and all this other stuff. So it forces it to produce less leaves, more fruit with less water inside that makes it more meaty, okay? And it helps to make, quote, it 3 times sweeter than normal produce. So it isn't just that they are growing vegetables and fruit, the former waste
is critical. It's used 20 times in Scripture.
But when the Jewish people returned from 2,000 years in exile, they found a barren desert land. And Orthodox Jewish author Moshe Kempinski says that was all in God's plan.
God says, I'm going to do something miraculous. I'm going to create a land that even though those climate issues don't call for it, it's going to be a land that's going to be filled also with dates and honey and also with milk, so that you know that nothing comes here. Nothing in this land comes here except when it's from me.
And God has delivered on that promise.
We consider leaders in that production of milk in the world.
Despite the heat, humidity, and limited resources, the Israeli cow produces more milk per year than cows in the U.S., European Union, and Australia. And what about the honey? Most believe honey in Bible times probably came from date trees. There are tens of thousands of acres of date trees in Israel. Soloway planted some 3,000 of those trees here.
This date orchard is here at Kibbutz Keturah in the Arava Desert. Each one of these trees produces about 350 pounds of dates a year.
Soloway even managed to sprout a 2,000-year-old date seed found by archaeologists years ago at Masada. According to Kempinski, the revival of trees in the land is the first sign of redemption.
Ezekiel 36 says, mountains, shoot forth your branches, give forth your fruit, because my children are coming home. That's an unusual thing for God to tell a tree. That's what he created a tree to do. Except God is saying in Leviticus, I said it's going to be a desolate land when I kick you out. But watch, when I bring my people back home, this land is going to come forth with blossoms and trees and fruits.
So, he says, every date you eat and every glass of milk you drink here is like prophecy being fulfilled.